Today's podcast is brought to you by the FNX Network, where we're just born different, and Vintage Villains, Toys, Comics, and Collectibles. Hello, FNX Network. This is the Broke Ass Podcast Network, and we are coming at you with multiple shows. And this, what you're listening to now, is called Frustrated with Wrestling, and we come in peace. My name is Shithead Dave.
And I am Dr. Nick.
We are two broke, jobless guys from America. And the idea of the podcast, we both were broke and jobless at the time. And we really digged on wrestling. And we would, every time we'd meet, we'd talk wrestling. Our wives would say, you know, you guys should have a podcast because we're not listening. Hopefully somebody else will out there.
Yeah, and of course those people were our wives.
Yeah, they like, please go record somewhere because we're tired of listening to the banter about wrestling.
Yes.
So we're like, you know, why don't we give it a shot? So we've been doing it for a few months on YouTube, and we got in contact with the FNX Network, and they dug our stuff, and now we're here.
Yeah.
We have arrived.
Glad to be here. I'll give you a little background on myself. My name is Dr. Nick. I got a doctorate in wrestling, if you would say. I've been a fan since 1989.
Yeah, Nick is the doctor. He has a doctorate in wrestling knowledge. If I need to know anything, I will go to Nick and ask him. He's a walking encyclopedia. They call me Shithead Dave, and I haven't really displayed that much on the podcast. Been sort of a nice guy, but if you really get to know me, my enemies, they do know that I'm a shithead. I can be a shithead at sometimes. So
also, I love long walks on the beach and Buffalo Wild Wings.
Oh yeah. Since this is a Australian website, we're probably going to make a lot of American references, and you know, just stick with us because we are Americans, and that means that we have no clue that there's a world out there. You know, it's just what our country does. And
don't get me wrong, I would love to visit Australia.
Oh,
I heard
yes.
It's beautiful.
Oh,
even though almost everything can kill you, apparently.
It's so much better than our concrete jungle here.
Oh, absolutely.
It's beautiful out there, and I bet more people from around the world are going to be listening to us now, not just from Australia, but from around the world, which is great. And yeah, so we're excited. This isn't going to be the only show that we bring you at the Broke Ass Podcast Network. We also, myself and a friend of mine, Aaron Martin, bring you the Martin and Shithead Show, where we talk about tech and gaming and media and all sorts of stuff, movies. So we'll be probably, you know, taking turns. Like, we're going to start with Frustrated Wrestling here, where we talk about the best and the worst of wrestling's history. We don't really like to be reporters on the current product. You know, we don't want to be one of those guys that shove news down your throat. We like to reminisce and celebrate.
Oh, absolutely. We may take a time to jump on our time machine and go back to a certain year. You know, we like to have fun here. Yeah,
you'll see a lot of gimmicks on this show. Like Dr. Nick just said, we do this thing where we jump in a time machine, a proverbial time machine, and we go back to, like, say, 1999, and we pretend that we're in that year. And we can't break kayfabe, as they say.
Yes.
You know, so we're here to have fun with you guys, here to interact, and let's get this thing started.
Let's dive right into it.
First topic we want to talk about:
big men in wrestling.
Yeah.
As you know, the heyday of wrestling on, you know, the posters, you would always see guys like Bruno Sammartino, big muscled guy, you know, versus this big guy. You'd have even guys that were under mask that were huge.
Oh yeah.
You know, you had Andre the Giant, you had Haystacks Calhoun, you know, you have all these guys. And the thing is there's a big difference between a big guy in wrestling and a fat guy.
Yeah.
Because big guys, such as, like, for instance, I wouldn't say Andre was a fat guy, but he was limited to what he could do because of his giantism.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between, say, a Big Cass from NXT or a Kevin Nash and then Bastion Booger.
Yeah, he was just a fat man.
He was a fat guy. We're talking about big, established muscle men in wrestling. You know, the greats.
Luger.
Yeah, Lex Luger.
I mean, granted, the Lex Express was a failed experiment.
Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast about just horrible gimmicks and and them trying to shove things down our
Bam
throats.
Bam Bigelow
Bam
was
Bam
a
Bigelow.
big man. I mean, where else would you see a big man like that do a drop kick?
Or a moonsault.
Yeah, or a moonsault.
It was a beautiful moonsault, yeah.
And then you have the current guys, which, you know, you had Batista, which he was a big man. You know, he was big, muscular. You know, where I'd have to say he was, besides like Sid Justice, he was probably one of my favorite power bombs. The Batista bomb is pretty vicious.
For the longest time, wrestling was built on the big guy.
Yeah.
You know, and right now we're in a transitional period of they started to push smaller guys like CM Punk's to the point where they had to really change the whole entire product to make it believable that CM Punk could beat these monsters.
Yeah.
But now it's sort of in a mix because they're pushing guys like Big Cass and
Magnus
and Rusev.
Yeah.
But they're also pushing guys like Adrian Neville and smaller guys.
Adam Rose.
I think they're trying to find the mix between it because back in the day when you thought of professional wrestling, you thought of a bunch of meatheads.
Yeah, you did. I mean, you thought of Paul Orndorff, Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Mr. Perfect.
Who was on the poster, but who you really went for were the Macho Mans, the Steamboats.
Later in you know, the what I would refer to as like the Federation years, it started to go into a transition. After Hogan left in '93, that's when they started to focus on guys like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Which neither one of those guys, I mean, they were muscular, but they were never big.
Yeah, and I think it's always pretty much stayed there after that because, granted, even The Rock and Stone Cold weren't Hogan size.
No.
They weren't 300 pounds of muscle.
No.
You know?
I mean, guys, like, don't get me wrong, like, when I watched wrestling when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up. I wanted to eat my vitamins and say my prayers and be muscular and rip my shirt.
Yeah.
Because that was the demographic.
Yeah.
You know, you never really saw a scrawny little dude.
Yeah, let's talk about like your generation. You're a good almost 10 years over me, or you know, pretty close. You grew up in the vitamins era, you
yes,
know,
I did.
the Icro Pro era, where you wanted to be the Hogans. I grew up in like I could put a T-shirt on and jeans and be Raven. You know, and I wanted to be Jeff Hardy. So.
Yeah.
There was no working out in my room.
No.
There was no Hogan workout tapes for me.
You didn't have a weight set.
No,
I
had a Hot Topic and I had a trampoline.
Yeah,
and you had your couch and your workout tapes.
Yeah, I did.
It was totally different.
I actually had the dumbbells and the jump ropes, and
my brother did too.
You know, it's interesting to think about the origin of wrestling. It was Greco-Roman. You know, back in the ancient times, you know, when you think of professional wrestling just as a whole, you think of two gladiators going at it to figure out who's the better man.
Yeah.
So, like, when I watch older matches, you know, which I love, and it doesn't even bother me that they're in black and white, a lot of these guys, like Bruiser Brody and Dick Murdoch, even like early Nick Bockwinkel, these guys, even though they weren't, you know, like overly big, they had a big presence because of how they moved around in the ring, how they talked on the mic.
Yeah.
You know, it was very over the top, almost as if they were superheroes. And we've talked about that before. When we hear of one of our superheroes dying, it's like, I didn't think that could happen.
Yeah, let's talk about the evolution of wrestling.
Oh, absolutely.
Back when
it's
were...
a mystery.
Yeah, evolution, as everybody probably knows, is a mystery. Yeah.
Yes.
Back in the day, they could be superheroes because the term kayfabe was still alive and well. It was alive and well until probably the late 90s. That was, you know, back in the day where we could look up to these guys. They were heroes to us. Now, as we know from today, they're shoplifters.
Yes.
They're
alcoholics.
They're druggies. And we know too much about them, and I think it's really ruined the sport. I want to talk about the wrestling fan, the evolution of back in the George Hackenschmidt era and the black and white era, where you would see grown men with their cigars.
And the women with their hats.
And the fedoras and stuff, and they would go to this dirty, sweaty, grungy building and watch wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, and nowadays it's not the parents dragging their kids on the weekends, it's the kids trying to get the parents to go now. And I think it's hurt the business a lot. And a lot of people are for family friendly.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a family, you want something to be family friendly, but it's not what wrestling is.
No, it's not.
Wrestling was never family friendly.
It was one of those things where, you know, a lot of the promoters at the time were boxing promoters, and then they moved into wrestling because wrestling at the beginning was mostly done at carnivals and fairs. You know,
Yeah.
it was a side attraction.
I mean, to rationalize it and to get the gripe across that I hate the family friendly era, it's almost like, just think about today. If you took UFC and made it a family friendly event, you know how bad it would be?
Oh, they would lose so much money.
Well, if people don't realize it or not, we're in that shitty of an era of wrestling.
Yeah, we are.
We are, because it used to be where 18 to 34, and now, you know, it's Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I mean, I remember watching Monday Night Raw. You know, my mom and dad always knew that I was smart enough that if, you know, my dad took me to a wrestling show, I could cheer and, you know, say things like suck it and hell yeah and stuff like that. But I knew better not to say it in school, not in front of my grandparents, not at home. You know, if I was watching in my room and Stone Cold was like, give me a hell yeah, I could do that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it was one of those things where, okay, you know, Nick's smart enough to realize that's not how you act in normal society. I knew the difference. And one of your favorite times was the early origins of late 90s ECW.
ECW, yeah, and I still bleed ECW.
Oh, hell yeah, and I don't blame you. I loved it too.
ECW was, I mean, people argue about, you know, the style of ECW, but it bled the wrestling style. It's what it was. It was a throwback, because at the time when ECW first came out, wrestling really lost itself.
Oh, yeah.
It went to the transitional period of cartoons, yeah. And ECW really turned it over and said, no, we're not going out without a fight, and we're going to bring you scantily clad women and brawls and, you know, real wrestling.
I would have loved to have been in the bingo hall in Philadelphia.
Me too.
I mean, that must have been amazing to sit there and to see guys in their prime of Rob Van Dam and Sabu and even the crazy bastard New Jack.
I mean, like, even Extreme Rules. There's nothing hardcore about the pay-per-view Extreme Rules.
They shouldn't even be able to use the phrase extreme.
Well, even ECW was... the term extreme and hardcore was not because they beat each other with, you know, bats and went through tables. It was because Paul Heyman would say, you two can go out there and you can have as long as a match as you want. You can have 40, 50 minutes, but you got to give these guys something extreme, hardcore, you know?
I mean, it didn't have to be necessarily every match of barbed wire bats and crazy...
And it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. And I mean, granted, there were times when that happened.
Yeah. That was the biggest misconception.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
and we've talked about this before with you. And you're, in the fewest of words, what do you think will be remembered? Like, let's say, like, what, you know, when your kids are born and they're old enough to, you know, realize a lot, when you explain ECW, what are you going to tell them? You obviously don't want them to read the garbage that's on the internet now.
I would tell my kids that ECW was a thing, was a promotion where you had the freedom to express yourself no matter what you were. If you couldn't get over on your athletic ability, it gave you an opportunity to go out there and connect with the fans in some way. Whether you were good on the mic, you were good at brawling, you were good at connecting some way. It was the true definition of independence in wrestling, where a lot of independent promotions nowadays like to watch Raw and say, we got to be Raw. I mean, they're doing something cool over there, we got to do it in our independent promotion. And they dropped the ball and they misinterpreted the definition of independent. Paul Heyman truly ran an independent promotion. He did what he wanted, he did it in the way he wanted. That's what I would tell my kids. I mean, it was freedom, it was punk rock, it was the counterculture, you know, and...
It definitely revolutionized everybody's idea of what wrestling was supposed to be.
Yeah, and I would tell anybody who wants to start a fed to take notes from that. As long as you have a ring and there's wrestling in the name, then you can go out there and mold it into anything you want it to be. I mean, it's your independent right as just a human being to do that.
I mean, a lot of people don't give Todd Gordon credit.
Yeah.
Because, granted, he was the financial backer for Paul Heyman.
Yeah.
Todd Gordon, was the original owner of Eastern Championship Wrestling. At that time, Eastern Championship Wrestling, WCW, was still the classic NWA. Guys like Ric Flair, guys like Harley Race.
Yeah, they had Snuka.
Yeah, they were the old school wrestling. They were still associated with that.
Yeah.
WWF at the time had gone away from that and had gone to, okay, well, let's see what we got here. Let's make a bunch of demographics for jobs.
Yeah.
We got a Native American, we have Big Boss Man for the police officers, we got a junkyard dog, we got, we got all these ridiculous gimmicks. And then you have the matches where everybody wanted to see, the Mr. Perfects, the Bret Harts, the Razor Ramon, the Diesel, stuff like that. Brian Pillman later on, pre-Attitude Era.
See, that's, what fascinates me, and I like that, you grew up in that era, so I can pick your brain about it.
I feel old.
As a kid in that era that you were, I could totally understand how you thought that era was cool. It was unique. Oh. But as an adult male, I don't know how anybody got through that era where they had an Indian, a plumber, it was very hard. They had Skinner. They had, it was a complete joke. They had a hockey player. Yeah. They had every demographic. They had a dead man.
And since our our new network and our sponsors from Australia, do any of you remember Outback Jack?
Yeah.
Or the Bushwhackers, which were, in our words, we think they were literally two guys that were mentally retarded.
Yeah.
They came out and licked each other.
This would be the part of the show where I want to plug our YouTube channel. This is technically on our YouTube channel number 40, and we've been doing this for quite a bit. So if anybody has the chance, please go back and listen to some of our stuff. We have covered pretty much everything so far, and just bad gimmicks and matches and racism in wrestling.
Yeah, we did a tribute to Owen Hart.
Yeah.
We did a green screen show with Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling.
Yeah, we do a green screen show called Top Rope Hits where we go back and just make fun of some of the worst moments in wrestling history.
Yeah, and one of my finer moments was opening the podcast was with literally 30 seconds of me farting.
Yeah, another thing, when you're listening to a podcast called Broadcast Podcast Network, and what do you expect from listening to two wrestling fans locked up in a room together? You're going to hear farts, you're going to hear burps, you're going to hear cussing, you're going to hear passionate debates. We're going to have people on the show joining us talking about just all sorts of crazy stuff. But that done with the plug section right there. Back to the Bushwhackers. I wanted to tell people to check our stuff out so they can dive into our Bushwhacker conversation. Looking back, the Bushwhackers, I think they missed the ball on it because to me they came out as two mentally challenged men.
Yeah.
I don't know what they were going for, but to me, they were retarded.
Well, their original gimmick before they came into the WWF, they were the Kiwis. Which I looked up the Kiwis. They were like a rough and tough, beat the crap tag team. They were vicious.
Yeah.
So my question is when they came, they met with Vince. Was like, all right, Vince, what you got for us? We're gonna call you the Bushwhackers. We're gonna have you dress up in camouflage pants, and you're gonna be like Australians, okay? Okay, that's cool. But I want you to act like you're retarded. What do you mean? Like
they had to have said that.
Like funny dancing around? No, I want you to act like you're retarded. I want you to walk out there, lick each other, lick the fans, put your arms in the air like, you're swimming.
Yeah.
And then we're going to give you a manager that comes out there and he looks like a dork and he chews on a sock.
I'm just saying, like, if they were going for anything else We didn't get it.
I don't know what in the world
It went over our heads.
Yeah.
Because to me, they were portrayed as retarded.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I'd have to say my favorite part because of, and a lot of people, as people will know from our previous videos, if you go check it out, and we'll have some on here too. I am, Dr. Nick, the wrestling encyclopedia, but I am also a avid toy collector.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in the wrestling / action figure collecting genre has a lot of crap with Jakks Pacific. They were from 95 until 2010. Granted, perfect example, your Road Dog up there on the shelf does not look like a Road Dog.
No, it doesn't.
No, not even
all.
close.
No.
The Jakks Pacific bone crunching action figures all the way up until Ruthless Aggression. These figures looked horrible, but it was all we had. I have a ton of them. I love them. I mean, they're nostalgia.
Yeah.
Granted, why in the world did Stone Cold come with a leaf blower?
Was that horrible, I'm trying to think of the toy line where they had them dressed up as, the Expendables.
Stomp.
Yeah, Stomp, where they all came accessorized with...
bazookas and guns and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't remember ever seeing X-Pac come in the ring with an Uzi.
I think they were trying to capitalize on the war zone.
I think they were.
But, yeah, I had no idea that slipped me back in the day.
I guess it amazes me. When you think of wrestlers now because of the independence and the Ring of Honor and stuff like that, there aren't that really big men out there anymore.
No.
Because guys like Chris Masters didn't get over.
Yeah.
Guys like Ryback and Curtis Axel, who are big men, don't get over anymore.
Yeah.
Triple H was always a big guy. He became bigger, as the years went on.
Yeah.
He always put over guys like that were big. But when you have, for instance, guys like Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, you have guys like...
the Wolves.
Yeah. And then you also have guys who... I don't think it would have made a difference. Though I will always remember them, even if they were, my size. Guys like Lance Storm, Christian, British Bulldog, who was gigantic.
They were always the workhorses.
Yeah, the workhorses in the company don't get the credit they deserve.
But now there's an overabundance of them.
There are.
And I think it might be because, just like in every other fandom, you grow up watching it, and now all those kids that grew up watching it is in love with it.
Yeah.
All these 5'11" men
they think they
are buffing up and starting to get into the business. And now, when you have 6'5", 300-pound muscle guys, now you're starting to see the world being taken over by these, middle guys.
Yeah. And, I'm going to throw in a little bit of a different spin on it, but when you think of boxing and UFC, you have the light heavyweight division, middleweight, and the heavy, there's different divisions.
Yeah.
In wrestling, there is no different division anymore.
Not anymore, yeah.
It's before they had a light heavyweight championship, which really didn't mean shit.
Yeah.
You had the Intercontinental title, which was the workhorse title, and then you have the cruiserweight, stuff like that. Now it's you're either big or you're sort of big.
Mm-hmm.
We may throw you a bone every now and then. Like when Daniel Bryan won the World Heavyweight title for the very first time, besides, at WrestleMania, I was like, this isn't going to last.
Yeah.
I knew that with the track record that WWE had, I'm like, okay, they're going to capitalize on this little bit of popularity, but they're not going to stick with it.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know if, I'm sure they get Raw in Australia. The other night, AJ Lee returned. Well, as we all know, AJ Lee is the wife of CM Punk. So every time somebody sees AJ Lee, they're like, "Oh, CM Punk's coming back."
Yeah.
No.
No.
She won the women's title back from Paige. Automatically, and this goes with every title ever put out there.
Mm-hmm.
This is my opinion. I want to get yours. I don't think a title makes a person.
It can. I think back in the day it did.
Like in Bruno Sammartino days?
I think the heavyweight title can make a person.
Yeah.
where, like, I mean, the title made Edge for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, well, Edge made himself. He was very talented, but when he got the heavyweight title, you started to look at him as a world champion now.
Not just a tag team.
Yeah,
champion.
but also I do get your point where you put the title on guys like Jack Swagger, and it's like you got to make that title.
Yeah,
I think it shifted now. It's a prop, and you really have to make yourself look like a world champion.
Because there's a lot of guys that never got the title, but will always be legendary. Jake the Snake never got a title.
Yeah.
$1 Million Man only had his own title. British Bulldog, I mean, he was the Intercontinental Champion, European Champion, Tag Team Champion.
Yeah.
But he never got the big title. He will always be remembered as being a top superstar. But, you know, like for instance, Stone Cold Steve Austin, even if he had never won the big title, I mean, granted, him winning that at WrestleMania 14 was probably the pinnacle of, okay, this is the Austin Express.
Yeah.
I think that skyrocketed it. But I don't really think that it, like, later on after his career kind of winded down, people didn't want to see him wrestle anymore. I mean, granted, they thought it was cool if he did. They just liked having him around.
Yeah.
You know, when he did the sheriff gimmick and stuff like that, like, if I was a professional wrestler, whether it be on the indie scene, the big fed or whatever, everybody, and they'll bullshit you and say, oh, I don't want a title. Yeah, you do. That's what you strive for.
Yeah.
You want that strap around your waist to say, I'm the guy.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know.
And that goes back to the point where the title can make you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and like when Stone Cold, like, same thing with Triple H. I don't have any desire to see him wrestle anymore.
No.
But I do think the show really benefits from having him on it.
Oh, yeah, it does.
He's a great talent. I mean, I can see him one day becoming
the Vince McMahon
to a Stone Cold.
Yep.
You know? Don't know who that Stone Cold's going to be, but I can see it because he's so good on the mic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he always has been good on the mic.
I mean, granted, I love his diatribes of, you know, and The Rock would do this and make fun of him and be like, I am the game.
Yeah.
I'm Triple H. I have a whore for a wife. I'd have to say, like, in general, because of the steroid scandal in 94, that, I think, right there put an end to big men for a little while.
Yeah, it like, now you can't have a super jack guy without people going like, what are you guys doing over here?
Yeah, what are you juicing him?
Yeah.
Because, granted, apparently nobody works out anymore. Yeah. That's what their thought process.
Why do you think, like, UFC, like, their champions are all average-looking buff guys?
Yeah.
They don't have any besides, like, the Kimbo Slices and the Brock Lesnar's, the freaks of nature.
Yeah, they're all
they're heavyweight
guys
champions.
That just work out and
we could look like that if we weren't doing this podcast, you know, eating fast food.
You gotta love the Burger King.
I know. The business is changing definitely, and when it started with big guys, and now I don't know where the hell it's going. I don't think WWE knows where it's going because all these news and money situations and roster spring cleanings and all this stuff.
Well, being broke and jobless, I hardly leave the house. A lot of times, so like I'll shut the blinds and close the door and everything, and I turn on my network or watch my DVDs or my VHS, and like, in my little house, it's still 1999.
Oh, yeah. I can't get out of it.
It's 94, it's 92.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I'm sorry, but, like, I don't think I'll ever tune into the network and go, oh, sweet, there's a Raw from 2007. Sweet.
Yeah. And I know this FNX Network is very progressive on keeping up with the wrestling times. We're going to be the little counterculture podcast here. We're going to keep it very, you know, classic. Yeah. So, I mean, go back and look at all of our stuff and all the stuff we talk about. We do bring up good stuff.
Yeah.
Like this new stuff, like Jeff Jarrett's Global Force Wrestling and all this stuff. But be interactive with us. Let us know what your favorite moments were in wrestling.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter. We're going to put a link up for that.
I mean, we'll talk to you right on this podcast. We'll go over some of the greatest memories in wrestling ever.
I'm usually just sitting in my beanbag eating Cheetos.
So. Yeah, follow us on Twitter. My
We also
name
have
is
a Facebook page.
Yeah, we have a Facebook page at Broadcast Podcast Network. Next time you hear us, it'll probably be me and Aaron for the Martin Shithead Show. Follow me on Twitter at shithead_Dave.
And mine is simply AWSOME85.
Uh-huh.
And, both of us like to tweet on a daily basis about different topics.
Oh, yeah.
It may be boring sometimes. You may see me tweet about, oh, that was a good sandwich.
But it was tweet-worthy, so
yes, it was.
It was good.
Yeah. I love that Arby's roast beef, man.
We're going to get off this thing here and see what kind of feedback we get from this. We really enjoy being on this network. I think we found a really good home here. So everybody have a good old day.
Good day, Meg.
Oh God, it's starting already.